When that text message from my husband lit up my phone at JFK International, I never expected it would be the beginning of my greatest revenge story. Something urgent came up at work. Had to take an earlier flight. Will explain later. Sorry. I stared at my phone in disbelief, my fingers turning white as I gripped it. This wasn't just any trip. It was supposed to be our second honeymoon, a chance to reconnect after months of growing apart. And now I was standing alone with my luggage, abandoned without even the courtesy of a phone call. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I tried calling Michael immediately, but it went straight to voicemail. Again and again, same result. I sent texts that showed as delivered but remained unread. The anger building inside me was unlike anything I'd felt before. 12 years of marriage, and this was how he treated me? As I stood there, fighting back tears and trying to decide what to do next, a familiar voice caught me off guard. Emma? Are you all right? I turned to see James Chen, Michael's business partner, looking at me with concern. James was tall, impeccably, dressed as always, and carrying just a small leather duffel bag, the same efficient traveler I'd seen at countless company functions. Michael left, I said, my voice cracking despite my best efforts. Apparently, he took an earlier flight. James's expression shifted from concern to something harder. Without telling you beforehand? That doesn't make sense. Apparently, something urgent came up, I said, showing him the text. James checked his phone, scrolling through what I assumed were messages. That's strange. There's nothing urgent happening at the firm right now. I would know. I'm the managing partner. What James said next changed everything. Actually, that's why I'm here. Michael told me yesterday he was postponing your trip because you weren't feeling well. I had clients flying in from Paris, so I booked myself on this flight last minute. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Michael hadn't just abandoned me. He'd planned this, deliberately lied to his business partner, and now left me stranded. The pieces started falling into place. His recent late nights, the mysterious weekend conferences, the growing emotional distance. I'm so sorry, Emma, James said, genuine sympathy in his voice. I don't know what's going on with him lately, but leaving you like this is inexcusable. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and made a decision in that moment that would change the course of my life. James, do you have room for one more in Paris? His eyebrows rose slightly, but a small smile formed on his lips. As a matter of fact, I do. The firm booked me in a first-class suite, one of those with 2 separate seats. It was the only option available on short notice. I smiled for the first time since receiving Michael's text. Perfect. I think it's time I had a proper honeymoon, just not with the husband who abandoned me. While James made quick calls to arrange everything, I did something I'd never done before. I opened our joint banking app and transferred a significant sum to my personal account. Money I'd contributed to our marriage but had always left in Michael's control. If he could leave me stranded, I could certainly take what was rightfully mine. 30 minutes later, I was sipping champagne in a first-class suite next to James, who was being remarkably understanding about the whole situation. 2 unexpected journeys, he said, clinking his glass against mine. As our glasses touched, my phone finally lit up with a call from Michael. I let it ring, watching his name flash on the screen until it stopped. Then I turned my phone off completely and slipped it into my bag. James raised an eyebrow questioningly. He can wait, I said, taking another sip of champagne. After all, something urgent came up for me too, my self-respect. As the plane began taxiing, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Freedom. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd been trapped in a marriage that had slowly suffocated me, and now, being abandoned had somehow set me free. What I didn't know Then was that this impromptu trip to Paris with James would uncover secrets about my husband that would make his airport abandonment seem trivial by comparison. The plane lifted off, and with it, the weight of my failing marriage. For the first time in years, I was excited about what tomorrow might bring. The first-class cabin hummed with quiet luxury as James worked on his laptop beside me. The gentle click of his keyboard had become almost meditative as I gazed out the window at the endless ocean below. My champagne glass stood empty, but the warmth of 3 previous refills lingered pleasantly in my system. "Emma?" James's voice pulled me from my thoughts. "You've been quiet. Everything okay?" I turned to find him studying me with those attentive dark eyes that always seemed to notice everything. At company dinners, while Michael worked the room with his practiced charm, James was the one who actually listened. "Just processing," I said, managing a small smile. "It's not every day your husband abandons you at an airport." James closed his laptop. "I've known Michael for 15 years, and I've never seen him act like this. The past few months, he's been different." "Different how?" I leaned forward, curious about Michael through the lens of his business partner. James hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "Distracted, taking calls in private, leaving early without explanation. The Michael I've known has always been meticulous, present. This new version is—" He trailed off, perhaps realizing he was speaking to the man's wife. "Secretive," I finished for him. "Distant. I've felt it too." The flight attendant approached, with a fresh bottle of champagne. "More refreshments before dinner is served?" "Please," I said, holding out my glass. As she poured, I felt a surge of satisfaction knowing this extravagance would appear on Michael's credit card statement. Petty? Perhaps. Deserved? Absolutely. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. After she left, James turned his body toward me, creating a pocket of privacy in our already secluded suite. "I don't mean to overstep, but is there something specific that happened between you two?" The question hung between us as I considered how much to share with this man who was, despite years of holiday parties and corporate events, still essentially my husband's colleague. "Nothing dramatic," I finally said. "Just 1,000 tiny paper cuts, missed dinners, forgotten anniversaries, conversations that never go beyond schedules and bills." I took a long sip of champagne. "Until one day you realize you're living with a stranger who happens to know where you keep the extra towels." James nodded, understanding in his eyes. The slow fade. "Exactly. Though this—" I gestured vaguely around us, meaning the abandoned airport scenario, "is a new level even for him." "What will you do when we land?" James asked. It was a fair question, one I hadn't fully considered in my impulsive decision to board this flight. "Honestly? I don't know. Check into a hotel, I suppose. See Paris. Figure out what's next. I have meetings tomorrow and the next day, but the firm booked me a suite at Le Bristol for the week. It has a separate bedroom and living area. You're welcome to stay there rather than scrambling for a hotel." I raised an eyebrow. "Won't that be awkward?" "Only if we make it so," he said simply. "You'd have your privacy, and I'll be in meetings most of the time anyway." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed in my purse. I'd turned it back on during boarding, half expecting the barrage that followed. 17 missed calls, 23 text messages, all from Michael. I pulled it out now to find another incoming call. Michael's face flashed on the screen, a photo from happier times, his arm around me at Lake Como 3 years ago. I had forgotten to change it. "You should probably answer," James said gently. "At least let him know you're safe." I nodded and took the call, my heart pounding unexpectedly. Hard. "Hello, Michael." "Emma, thank God. Where are you? I've been going out of my mind." His voice carried that familiar, frantic edge he got when things slipped from his control. "I'm on a flight to Paris," I said coolly. "Our flight to Paris." A long pause. "What? How? I thought—" "You thought what? That I'd just go home and cry after you abandoned me at the airport with a text message?" The anger I'd been controlling bubbled up suddenly. 15 years together, 12 years of marriage, and you couldn't even call me? "Emma, please." His voice dropped to a whisper, suggesting he wasn't alone. "It was an emergency. I had to save it." I cut him off. "James told me there's nothing urgent happening at the firm. He would know, since he's the managing partner." "The same James who happened to be at the airport when you left me there." Another long silence, this one heavy with realization. "You're with James?" The shift in his tone was immediate, from concerned husband to something colder. "Yes. Apparently there was a first-class suite available after all. Who knew?" "Emma, listen to me. Whatever he's told you, he hasn't told me anything except that you lied about why you were canceling our trip. I'm figuring out the rest on my own." "This isn't like you," Michael said, frustration evident. "Getting on a plane with another man? My business partner?" That made me laugh. A genuine, bitter laugh. "And abandoning your wife at an airport is like you? Good to know." James politely pretended to be absorbed in something on his laptop, but I knew he could hear every word. "I'm at Charles de Gaulle now," Michael said, his voice quieter. "Where? Are you landing? I'll meet you." The revelation stunned me. He was already in Paris? How was that possible unless he'd left hours before me, not just on an earlier flight? "So your emergency brought you to Paris after all?" I asked, the pieces shifting in my mind. "How convenient." "It's not what you think," he said quickly. "I can explain everything when I see you." I looked at James, who met my gaze with quiet support. "No," I said firmly. "I don't think you can. Enjoy Paris, Michael. I know I will." I ended the call before he could respond, my hand shaking slightly, as I placed the phone face down on my tray table. "He's in Paris," I told James, who didn't seem nearly as surprised as I expected. "Did you know?" James hesitated, which was answer enough. "What aren't you telling me?" I asked, suddenly feeling like I was missing critical pieces of a puzzle everyone else could see. James sighed heavily, then reached for his carry-on beneath the seat. He withdrew a manila envelope and handed it to me. "I was going to wait until we landed. Give you time to adjust," he said. "But you deserve to know now. This is why I actually came to Paris." I opened the envelope with trembling fingers, unprepared for how the contents would irrevocably change everything I thought I knew about my marriage. Michael rushed forward as we exited the car, his face cycling through expressions, relief, confusion, anger, before settling on a practiced smile that didn't reach his eyes. The same smile I'd seen him deploy at countless depositions when opposing. Counsel threw him a curveball. "Emma," he said, reaching for me. "Thank God you're here. I've been worried sick." I stepped back, just enough to evade his touch without creating a scene. The doorman and driver were watching with polite Parisian disinterest. "Have you?" I asked, my voice light but edged. Funny way of showing it, leaving me at JFK with just a text. His eyes flickered to James, who stood slightly behind me, his presence a silent challenge. "I can explain everything," Michael said, lowering his voice. "But we should talk privately." "Mr. Chen, welcome back to Le Bristol," the concierge interjected smoothly, approaching with elegant deference. "Your suite is prepared. Shall we have your luggage brought up?" "Thank you, Philippe." James handed him a generous tip. "And please arrange for a second key for Ms. Bradford." Michael's jaw tightened visibly. "You're staying with him?" I smiled pleasantly, very aware of the public setting. "The arrangement makes sense, given the circumstances." "What circumstances?" Michael hissed, his composure cracking. That I had? A work emergency. That's hardly grounds for— For what, Michael? I interrupted, keeping my voice controlled but unmistakably cold. For making my own decisions? For not sitting at home waiting for you to remember you have a wife? A flash of genuine fear crossed his face, not the reaction of a husband concerned about marital infidelity, but something sharper, more calculated. He cast a nervous glance toward the street as if checking whether we were being observed. Emma, please, 5 minutes of your time. That's all I'm asking. The desperation in his tone was unlike anything I'd heard from him before. This wasn't the Michael who'd confidently argued cases before the Supreme Court. This was a man on the verge of unraveling. I glanced at James, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. Fine, 5 minutes in the lobby bar. I need a drink anyway. Relief washed over Michael's face, quickly replaced by wariness when James followed us into the hotel. I meant alone, he said, stopping at the bar entrance. James stays, I replied. Firmly. Anything you need to say to me, you can say in front of him. The bar was a masterpiece of old-world elegance, dark wood, brass fixtures, and plush velvet seating. We chose a corner table, far enough from other patrons for privacy. A server appeared immediately. Un Kir Royale, I ordered, suddenly craving the bittersweet combination of champagne and crème de cassis that had been my favorite during our honeymoon in Provence, back when I still believed in the man beside me. Scotch. Neat, Michael said curtly. Sparkling water, James added, earning a look of contempt from Michael that he ignored with practiced ease. Once the server departed, Michael leaned forward, his voice dropping to an urgent whisper. Whatever James has told you, it's not the Yao. Full story. He's manipulating you. Interesting accusation, I said, studying my manicure with deliberate casualness. Considering you're the one who lied about canceling our trip. You told James I was sick, then told me you had to leave because of an emergency. So who's manipulating whom? Michael shot a venomous look at James. You're putting my wife in danger by involving her in firm business. I haven't involved her in anything, James replied calmly. You did that when you used her as your alibi. Our drinks arrived, creating a momentary pause in the confrontation. I took a long sip of my kir, savoring the tartness that cut through, the champagne's sweetness. Just like this moment, the bitter satisfaction of finally seeing through Michael's facade. Listen to me, Michael said, ignoring his untouched scotch. There are things happening you don't understand. Powerful people are involved. You need to go home, Emma. Today. Why? So you can continue your meetings with Elise Beaumont without complications? I asked innocently. The color drained from his face. How did you know about your French investor? I finished for him. I've known about Elise for months, Michael. The perfume on your shirts wasn't exactly subtle. Chanel Gabrielle, if I'm not mistaken. Too young for me, you once said when I considered buying it. This was a calculated lie. I'd only learned about Elise from James's envelope. But Michael's reaction confirmed everything. He looked stricken, misreading my knowledge of the affair while completely missing the more serious accusation of financial crimes. It's not what you think, he said automatically, the guilty husband's universal refrain. It never is, I replied, feeling a strange calm. But that's not why I'm here. Then why? He searched my face, genuinely puzzled. If you suspected something, why come to Paris at all? It was a fair question. The old Emma, the carefully curated corporate wife who arranged dinner parties and maintained appearances, would have confronted him privately or silently filed for divorce. She wouldn't have flown to Paris with his business partner or created this public spectacle. Because I'm done being convenient, I said, surprising myself with the vehemence in my voice. Done being the background character in your life. I want to see Paris, Michael. I want to visit the galleries and drink wine by the Seine. And if that complicates your little business arrangement with Elise, that's not my problem. Michael's 5 minutes had stretched to 15, his desperation growing with each passing moment. He'd abandoned subtlety now, openly pleading. Emma, you don't understand what's at stake. If Roland finds out you're here, if he thinks you know, anything— Roland Wakefield? I interrupted, feigning surprise. What does he have to do with your emergency meetings with Elise? Michael froze, realizing his mistake. Nothing. I misspoke. I don't think you did, James said quietly. I think you're afraid Roland will discover Emma knows about your money laundering operation. The accusation hung in the air between us. Michael's expression hardened as he turned to face James fully for the first time. You have no idea what you're talking about, he said, his voice dangerously low. None at all. But you've always been jealous, haven't you? Always watching from the sidelines while I brought in the big clients, made the crucial connections. James remained unmoved by the outburst. The SEC doesn't care about professional jealousy, Michael. They care about offshore accounts and unexplained fund transfers. Is that a threat? Michael's hand tightened around his glass. It's reality, James replied. The audit starts Monday. Something shifted in Michael's demeanor. A subtle recalculation. His eyes darted to the hotel entrance, then back to us, his expression settling into something more controlled. Fine. You want to know the truth? Yes. I've been meeting with Elise. Yes, Roland is involved, but it's not what you think. He leaned closer. We're building a case against Anton Giroux. The name meant nothing to me, but James's reaction was immediate. A slight straightening of his posture, a narrowing of his eyes. Anton Giroux is untouchable, James said. The Justice Department has tried for years. Not if we have what I've found, Michael countered. Financial records linking him directly to terrorist financing. That's why the secrecy, the private meetings. Giroux has people everywhere. I watched this exchange with growing suspicion. Michael was too smooth, too rehearsed. This felt like one of his courtroom performances, a convincing narrative built to distract from the truth. And you couldn't tell me any of this? I asked. Couldn't trust your wife of 12 years? I was protecting you, Michael insisted, reaching for my hand. I pulled away. By lying? By abandoning me at an airport? That's not protection, Michael. That's convenience. His phone buzzed with an incoming text. He glanced at it, and something changed in his expression. A flicker of genuine alarm. I have to go, he said abruptly, standing. Emma, please think about what I've said. Go home tomorrow. For your safety. I'm not going anywhere, I replied firmly. Michael hesitated, then leaned down and whispered in my ear, his breath hot against my skin. Then be careful who you trust. James isn't the white knight you think he is. With that cryptic warning, he left, moving quickly through the bar and out of the hotel without looking back. James and I sat in silence for a long moment, processing the encounter. He's lying, I finally said, about Anton Giroux and the terrorism connection. Yes, James agreed, but the question is why that particular lie? And who just texted him? I thought about Michael's sudden departure, the fear in his eyes that seemed genuine for the first time in our conversation. I think, I said slowly, realization dawning, someone was watching us. And whoever it was, Michael is more afraid of them than he is of you or the SEC. James didn't look surprised. Roland Wakefield is known for keeping close tabs on his associates. My guess is he had someone following Michael and spotted us together. So, what happens now? Now, James said, finishing his water, we use their paranoia against them. If Roland is watching, let's give him something to see. I raised an eyebrow. What did you have in mind? Dinner at L'Arpège tonight. It's where the financial elite gather in Paris. If Roland has people watching, they'll report that we're openly together, discussing business. Making Michael look like the weak link who can't control his wife, I concluded, understanding the Strategy. Precisely. People under pressure make mistakes. And right now, Michael is feeling pressure from all sides. As we stood to leave the bar, I caught sight of myself in the mirrored wall behind the counter. I expected to see exhaustion or strain, but instead I looked more alive than I had in years. Eyes bright, posture straight, a woman reclaiming her power one calculated move at a time. Paris might not be the romantic second honeymoon I'd planned, but it was turning into something far more valuable. My liberation. My liberation. What I can't reconcile, I continued, is how I missed it. I pride myself on reading people. It's what made me effective with donors, with artists, with difficult board members. Perhaps you saw exactly what he wanted you to see, James suggested. Michael is an exceptional performer. It's what makes him dangerous now. He can project sincerity even while lying to your face. I thought about our confrontation in the hotel bar, how smoothly Michael had pivoted from denial to justification, to creating an entirely new narrative about terrorism investigations. Tomorrow, I said, making a decision, I want to see Elise myself, before we implement our plan. I need to understand what kind of person would participate in this scheme. That can be arranged, James said after a moment's hesitation. She has a regular morning routine, breakfast at Café de Flore, then shopping along Boulevard Saint-Germain. Perfect. A chance encounter between two women with something significant in common. James studied me with unexpected intensity. You're not what I expected, Emma. What did you expect? Someone. He paused, choosing his words carefully. More defeated by Michael's betrayal. Less strategic. I laughed softly, the sound carrying across the quiet water. 12 years as a corporate wife teaches you strategy, James. Just a different battlefield. As we turned to walk back toward the hotel, my phone buzzed with a text from Michael. We need to talk. Breakfast tomorrow? Please. I showed James the message, and he nodded. Accept. It gives us perfect cover for tracking his movements afterward. Typed a quick reply. 8:30, hotel restaurant. Within seconds, Michael responded, Thank you. And Emma, I really am sorry about everything. I put the phone away without replying to his last message. Sorry didn't begin to cover what Michael had done, not just to me, but to the firm, to James, to his professional obligations. Tomorrow would begin the endgame, with Michael caught between Roland's suspicions, James's investigation, and my unexpected resistance to being a convenient victim. For years, I'd played by rules Michael created, accepting his definition of our marriage and my role within it. Now I was making my own rules. And in this new game, I intended to win. Sleep eluded me despite the luxurious comfort of Le Bristol's Egyptian cotton sheets. I lay awake, watching Paris's amber lights create shifting patterns on the ceiling as I rehearsed tomorrow's confrontations. First Michael, then Elise. Die. Suite James had offered was more spacious than most Manhattan apartments, with a separate bedroom that afforded privacy. Still, knowing he was just beyond the door, working late into the night on his laptop, created an odd intimacy. Two people united by betrayal, strategizing like generals before battle. At 7:15, I rose and prepared methodically, selecting a navy, acris pantsuit that projected confidence without ostentation. As I applied makeup, I studied my reflection, searching for traces of the woman who had boarded that plane at JFK just yesterday. Hurt, confused, reacting rather than acting. She seemed like a stranger now. James was already dressed when I emerged, reviewing documents at the dining table while sipping espresso. Sleep well? He asked, glancing up. No, I admitted, pouring myself coffee from the silver pot. But I'm clear-headed, ready. He nodded, understanding without need for elaboration. Michael will try to isolate you, suggest privacy, perhaps propose returning to your room to talk. I know. I'll keep him in the restaurant. The public setting would constrain his manipulation, tactics, force him to maintain appearances. Remember, we don't need a confession, just confirmation of his movements today. If he mentions meeting Elise, I act jealous but not suspicious, I finished. The betrayed wife focused on the affair, oblivious to the financial crimes. James handed me a small object that resembled a stylish brooch. Wear this. It's a recording device, not for legal evidence. That would be inadmissible, but for our protection. I pinned it to my lapel, oddly touched by his concern. You've done this before. Corporate espionage cases, he confirmed, though never with such personal stakes. At 8:25, I entered the hotel's restaurant alone, selecting a table with clear sightlines to both entrances. Michael arrived precisely. At 8:30, his punctuality a constant even in crisis. He wore his power suit, charcoal brioni, crisp white shirt, subtle Hermes tie, his armor for difficult negotiations. Emma, he said, bending to kiss my cheek. I turned slightly, causing his lips to brush air instead. Michael, I replied coolly, gesturing for him to sit. He ordered coffee, then leaned forward with practiced earnestness. Thank you for meeting. Me? I know you must have questions. Just one, actually. I met his gaze directly. Why? The simplicity of my question seemed to unbalance him. He'd clearly prepared for recriminations, tears, perhaps bargaining, not this calm inquiry. It's complicated, he began, falling back on his lawyer's instinct to qualify and equivocate. Isn't it always? I sipped my coffee, maintaining eye contact. Simplify it for me. Michael glanced around, confirming no one was within earshot. What I told you yesterday about investigating Anton Giraud, that wasn't entirely fabricated. There is an investigation, but it's unorthodox. Meaning illegal. I translated flatly. His expression tightened. Meaning necessary. The official channels are compromised. Giroux has people everywhere. DOJ, SEC, even the Paris Financial Crimes Unit. So you, Roland, and Elise decided to become vigilantes? How noble. Mock, if you want, Michael said, frustration, edging his voice. But we've obtained evidence that could finally bring Giroux down. The Mercier acquisition is just a means to access his operational accounts. I examined him carefully, searching for tells he'd developed over years of high-stakes litigation. The slight tension around his eyes, the controlled rhythm of his breathing. He was lying, but with enough truth mixed in to make it plausible. And your relationship with Elise? Is that also part of your heroic undercover operation? Pain flickered across his features. Genuine or masterfully performed, I couldn't tell. That's separate, a mistake. One I deeply regret. Convenient timing for regret, I observed. Yesterday you were abandoning me at an airport. Today you're overwhelmed with remorse. Yesterday I was trying to protect you, he insisted. Emma, these people are dangerous. When I saw you with James at the hotel, I realized I'd made a terrible, miscalculation. By lying to me? Or by getting caught? The waiter approached with breakfast menus, providing a momentary reprieve from our tense exchange. Michael ordered nothing, claiming a meeting. I requested avocado toast, determined to maintain normalcy despite the absurdity of discussing criminal conspiracies over breakfast. Once we were alone again, Michael leaned closer. James isn't telling you everything. He has his own agenda in this. Unlike you, whose motives are transparently pure, I replied, unable to keep the sarcasm from my voice. I deserved that, he acknowledged, surprising me with this concession. But whatever you think of me personally, you need to be careful. Roland is nervous about your presence here. He believes James may have shared sensitive information with you. This confirmed what James had suggested. I was perceived as a threat precisely because they couldn't assess what I knew. Sleep eluded me, despite the luxurious comfort of Le Bristol's Egyptian cotton sheets. I lay awake, watching Paris's amber lights create shifting patterns on the ceiling as I rehearsed tomorrow's confrontations. First Michael, then Elise. The why. Suite James had offered was more spacious than most Manhattan apartments, with a separate bedroom that afforded privacy. Still, knowing he was just beyond the door, working late into the night on his laptop, created an odd intimacy. Two people united by betrayal, strategizing like generals before battle. At 7:15, I rose and prepared methodically, selecting a navy, acris pantsuit that projected confidence without ostentation. As I applied makeup, I studied my reflection, searching for traces of the woman who had boarded that plane at JFK just yesterday. Hurt, confused, reacting rather than acting. She seemed like a stranger now. James was already dressed when I emerged, reviewing documents at the dining table while sipping espresso. "Sleep well?" he asked, glancing up. "No," I admitted, pouring myself coffee from the silver pot. "But I'm clear-headed, ready." He nodded, understanding without need for elaboration. "Michael will try to isolate you. Suggest privacy, perhaps propose returning to your room to talk. I know, I'll keep him in the restaurant." The public setting would constrain his manipulation. Tactics, force him to maintain appearances. Remember, we don't need a confession, just confirmation of his movements today. If he mentions meeting Elise, I act jealous but not suspicious, I finished. The betrayed wife focused on the affair, oblivious to the financial crimes. James handed me a small object that resembled a stylish brooch. "Wear this. It's a recording device, not for legal evidence. That would be inadmissible. But for our protection." I pinned it to my lapel, oddly touched by his concern. "You've done this before." "Corporate espionage cases," he confirmed, though never with such personal stakes. At 8:25, I entered the hotel's restaurant alone, selecting a table with clear sightlines to both entrances. Michael arrived precisely at 8:30, his punctuality a constant even in crisis. He wore his power suit, charcoal brioni, crisp white shirt, subtle Hermes tie, his armor for difficult negotiations. "Emma," he said, bending to kiss my cheek. I turned slightly, causing his lips to brush air instead. "Michael," I replied coolly, gesturing for him to sit. He ordered coffee, then leaned forward with practiced earnestness. "Thank you for meeting me. I know you must have questions." "Just one, actually." I met his gaze directly. "Why?" The simplicity of my question seemed to unbalance him. He'd clearly prepared for recriminations, tears, perhaps bargaining, not this calm inquiry. "It's complicated," he began, falling back on his lawyer's instinct to qualify and equivocate. "Isn't it always?" I sipped my coffee, maintaining eye contact. "Simplify it for me." Michael glanced around, confirming no one was within earshot. "What I told you yesterday about investigating Anton Giroux, that wasn't entirely fabricated. There is an investigation, but it's unorthodox." "Meaning illegal?" I translated flatly. His expression tightened. "Meaning necessary. The official channels are compromised. Giroux has people everywhere. DOJ, SEC, even the Paris Financial Crimes Unit. So you, Roland, and Elise decided to become vigilantes? How noble." "Mock if you want," Michael said, frustration edging his voice. "But we've obtained evidence that could finally bring Giroux down. The Mercier acquisition is just a means to access his operational accounts." I examined him carefully, searching for tells he'd developed over years of high-stakes litigation. The slight tension around his eyes, the controlled rhythm of his breathing. He was lying, but with enough truth mixed in to make it plausible. "And your relationship with Elise? Is that also part of your heroic undercover operation?" Pain flickered across his features. Genuine or masterfully performed, I couldn't tell. "That's separate. A mistake. One I deeply regret." "Convenient timing for regret," I observed. Yesterday you were abandoning me at an airport. Today you're overwhelmed with remorse. Yesterday I was trying to protect you, he insisted. Emma, these people are dangerous. When I saw you with James at the hotel, I realized I'd made a terrible miscalculation. By lying to me, or by getting caught? The waiter approached with breakfast menus, providing a momentary reprieve from our tense exchange. Michael ordered nothing, claiming a meeting. I requested avocado toast, determined to maintain normalcy despite the absurdity of discussing criminal conspiracies over breakfast. Once we were alone again, Michael leaned closer. James isn't telling you everything. He has his own agenda in this. Unlike you, whose motives are transparently pure, I replied, unable to keep the sarcasm from my voice. I deserved that, he acknowledged, surprising me with this concession. But whatever you think of me personally, you need to be careful. Roland is nervous about your presence here. He believes James may have shared sensitive information with you. This confirmed what James had suggested. I was perceived as a threat precisely because they couldn't assess what I knew. Roland Wakefield recovered first, rising slightly in a gesture of old-world courtesy that contrasted with the cold calculation in his eyes. Mrs. Matthews, he said, his British accent precisely modulated. What an unexpected pleasure. Is it? I countered, maintaining my smile. I rather thought you were expecting me, given your surveillance team at L'Arpège last night. A flicker of surprise crossed his features, not at being caught, but at my directness. He gestured to the empty chair at their table. Please join us. Elise remained silent, her initial shock hardening into something more defensive. Up close, I could see the subtle enhancements to her beauty. Expertly applied makeup, likely cosmetic work around her eyes. Everything about her was curated for effect, from her camellia-scented perfume to the strategic décolletage of her silk blouse. You have me at a disadvantage, I said to her, taking the offered seat. You know who I am, but we haven't been formally introduced. Elise Beaumont, she replied, her French accent more pronounced than I'd expected, though I suspect you already knew that. Yes, I agreed pleasantly. Just as you knew I was Michael's wife when you began sleeping with him. Roland sighed theatrically. Americans, always so direct. He signaled a waiter. Another espresso for Madam Matthews, please. I studied him while waiting for the interruption to pass. Roland Wakefield, 60-something, renowned for his ruthlessness in corporate acquisitions. The firm's international rainmaker, whose continental connections had built their European practice. His tailoring was impeccable, his manicure pristine, his signet ring subtly announcing old family connections. Now, he said once the waiter departed, shall we dispense with the marital dramatics and discuss what truly brings you to Paris? With James Chen, no less. Perhaps I simply decided to continue with my vacation plans despite my husband's indiscretions. Roland's thin smile never reached his eyes. A woman of your intelligence wouldn't cross the Atlantic for mere confrontation, especially not in the company of her husband's business partner. Unless that business partner offered first-class accommodations and better conversation, I countered, matching his tone. Elise shifted uncomfortably, glancing toward the street as if expecting someone. Michael, most likely. Your situation is precarious, Mrs. Matthews, Roland continued, leaning forward slightly. You're involved in matters beyond your understanding, allying yourself with a man whose motives are questionable at best, as opposed to my husband's motives? Or yours? I accepted the coffee from the returning waiter with a murmured thanks. Michael is protecting you, Elise interjected, speaking with unexpected intensity. You should return to New York before... Before what? I interrupted. Before I discover more about the Mercier acquisition? About Anton Giroux? About offshore accounts receiving funds diverted from client billing? Their reactions told me everything. Roland's minute stillness, Elise's widened eyes. I'd hit targets, with each shot, confirming James's intelligence without revealing exactly what we knew or didn't know. James has been quite thorough in his investigation, I added, pressing my advantage. The SEC will be fascinated by his findings. Roland recovered quickly, his expression settling into something almost amused. James Chen, always so righteous. He stirred his coffee with deliberate precision. Did he mention his own involvement in the Geneva arrangements last year? Or his meeting with Giroux in Zurich? This was unexpected, a counter-allegation that either revealed James's duplicity or represented a calculated attempt to divide us. Interesting deflection, I said, refusing to show uncertainty. Next, you'll claim the financial discrepancies are merely creative accounting. They are precisely that, Roland replied smoothly. Structured transactions designed to avoid unjust taxation while we build a case against Giroux's network. Everything documented, everything approved by relevant authorities. Which authorities? I challenged. The kind that don't issue press releases, he said with a thin smile. Special operations require special permissions? Elise's phone buzzed, drawing her attention. She glanced at it, then at Roland with clear alarm. He's here, she murmured. Roland nodded almost imperceptibly, then refocused on me. Mrs. Matthews, you seem like a practical woman. Whatever James has told you, consider this. Michael has spent his career building legal expertise that governments value. His work with us serves interests beyond corporate profit. Government-sanctioned money laundering? How patriotic. Tracking terrorist financing requires following money through legitimate channels, Roland countered. The Mercier acquisition provides access to banking networks Giroux controls. But this operation collapses if exposed prematurely. I maintained my skeptical expression, but doubt had crept in. Could they be telling the truth? Was there some covert operation that explained the financial irregularities James had discovered? Before I could respond, I saw Michael approaching across the cafe, his face registering shock at finding me seated with Roland and Elise. Our eyes met, and something unspoken passed between us. Not the connection of lovers, but the wary recognition of adversaries who once shared intimate knowledge of each other. Emma, he said, stopping at our table. What are you doing here? Having coffee with your colleagues, I replied with deliberate lightness. We were just discussing Anton Giroux and creative accounting practices. Michael paled slightly, looking to Roland for guidance. The older man gave an almost imperceptible nod. Permission to speak, I realized, noting the power dynamic. This isn't the place, Michael said, lowering his voice. These are sensitive matters. Yet perfectly innocent, according to Roland, I observed. Government-approved operations tracking terrorist financing. Is that the story we're settling on? Uncertainty flickered in Michael's eyes. He hadn't expected me to know this narrative. It's complicated, Emma. So you've said, repeatedly. I rose from my chair, suddenly tired of their manipulations. Enjoy your meeting. I have some shopping to do. Roland stood as well, his manner shifting to something more conciliatory. Mrs. Matthews, Emma, perhaps we've gotten off on the wrong foot. You clearly care about the firm's reputation, as do we all. Maybe we could continue this discussion more privately? My suite at the Ritz this afternoon, perhaps? The invitation was clearly a trap, an attempt to isolate me from James and control the narrative. That's very kind, I replied, but I have plans with James today. Museums, I think. He's quite knowledgeable about Impressionist art. Michael's expression hardened at this deliberate provocation. Emma, whatever game you're playing with James, it ends now. He's using you to undermine the firm, and me. And me. Interesting perspective from a man who abandoned his wife at an airport, I said, gathering my purse. Text me when you're ready to tell the truth, Michael. All of it, not just convenient portions. As I turned to leave, Elise caught my wrist, not aggressively, but with surprising urgency. Be careful, she said quietly, her eyes conveying something beyond our practiced roles of wife and mistress. Not everyone is who they appear to be. I gently removed my arm from her grasp. On that, we agree completely. Walking away from their table, I felt their eyes following me. 3 people whose carefully constructed scheme was threatened by my unpredictable presence. I didn't look back, maintaining a confident posture until I'd exited the cafe and rounded the corner to our prearranged meeting point. James was waiting in a small bookshop pretending to browse art volumes. "Well?" he asked as I approached. "They're sticking to the counterterrorism story," I reported. "Government-sanctioned operation to track Giroux's terrorist financing through the Mercier acquisition." James's expression darkened. "I expected as much. It's their perfect cover. Just enough truth to be plausible, impossible to verify quickly." "Is there any possibility they're telling the truth?" I asked, the doubt that had begun at the cafe growing stronger. "Possible but unlikely," he replied, guiding me toward the back of the store where we couldn't be observed from the street. If this were a legitimate intelligence operation, they wouldn't have falsified billing records or hidden transactions from the partnership. "Roland mentioned something about you," I said carefully. "A meeting with Giroux in Zurich? Geneva arrangements?" James stiffened almost imperceptibly. "Deflection tactics. I've never met Giroux, though I did attend banking compliance conferences in both cities last year. They're twisting factual events to create false implications." His explanation seemed reasonable, but Roland's confident manner had planted seeds of doubt. Who could I truly trust in this web of deception? "They invited me to the Ritz this afternoon," I told him. "Roland's suite." "Absolutely not," James said immediately. "Too isolated, too controlled." I declined, I assured him, though I'm curious what they plan to offer or threaten. Both, most likely. Financial incentives coupled with implied consequences. James checked his watch. "We've only got a few hours before the bank opens. We need to move." "The bank?" I asked, confused by this new development. "Credit Suisse. Private banking division. While you were confronting our trio, I received confirmation that Elise opened a safe deposit box there last week. According to my source, she personally deposited documents related to the Mercier transaction. And you think these documents would prove the money laundering?" "I'm certain of it. The legitimate transaction paperwork should match the versions filed with regulatory authorities. Any discrepancies would confirm their criminal intent." "How do we access it?" "I assume high-security Swiss banks don't simply allow random visitors into their vault." James's expression shifted to something I hadn't seen before. A hardness that reminded me this man operated in realms beyond corporate law. Not random visitors, no. But Elise added an authorized user to the account 3 days ago. Someone who could access the box in her absence or incapacitation. Michael, I guessed. Precisely. And fortunately for us, they used your anniversary as the access code. 6 digits, month, day, year. My mind raced ahead of his explanation. "You want me to impersonate Elise?" "No," he corrected. "That would be fraud. I want you to accompany Michael, who has legitimate access, while he retrieves specific documents we need." "And why would Michael do that willingly?" "Because," James said, "by now he's received evidence that Roland plans to betray him, make him the scapegoat if their scheme collapses." I stared at him, processing this new twist. "What evidence?" "Emails I arranged to be sent from a secured account appearing to be Roland's private server, discussing contingency plans that involve Michael taking full legal responsibility." The ruthlessness of this strategy stunned me momentarily. "You falsified evidence?" "I accelerated an inevitable betrayal," James countered. "Roland absolutely has such contingency plans. I merely created the documentation sooner than he intended to reveal it." And if Michael contacts Roland to verify? He won't. The emails explicitly warn that Roland would deny everything if confronted. Besides, James added with grim certainty, Michael already suspects he's being set up. He's too smart not to have prepared his own exit strategy. My phone buzzed with an incoming text. Michael, we need to talk privately, not at the hotel. Safety concerns. Meet me at Palais Royal Gardens in 30 minutes. Come alone. I showed James the message. Perfect timing. Too perfect, he said, frowning. This could be Roland's play, not Michael's. Only one way to find out, I replied, surprising myself with my willingness to take the risk. James studied me for a long moment. You've changed since yesterday. Not changed, I corrected him. Adapted. There's a difference. He nodded slowly. The gardens are public enough to be relatively safe, but have limited surveillance cameras. I'll establish position before you arrive, but stay out of sight unless necessary. As we left the bookshop and parted ways, James to secure the perimeter, me to approach more directly, I reflected on the bizarre transformation of the past 24 hours. I'd boarded a plane to Paris, expecting a second honeymoon with my husband. Now I was navigating international financial crimes, covert surveillance, and multiple layers of betrayal. The strangest part wasn't the danger or the deception. It was how alive I felt. After years of emotional numbness in my marriage, even fear and uncertainty were welcome sensations. Proof that beneath the perfect corporate wife persona, a more authentic self had been waiting for the chance to emerge. There were Palais Royal Gardens spread before me, formal and elegant with their perfectly trimmed trees and stone columns. Somewhere among them, Michael waited with whatever version of the truth he'd decided to offer. And somewhere unseen, James watched, ready to intervene if necessary. I took a deep breath and stepped into the garden, wondering which would prove more dangerous, my husband or his business partner. The Palais Royal Gardens embraced me with unexpected serenity, gravel crunching underfoot, the scent of early roses mingling with Parisian exhaust, fountains creating a gentle soundtrack that partially muffled the city beyond. I moved past clusters of tourists photographing the distinctive black and white Buren columns, scanning for Michael among the locals reading on benches or students sketching the classical architecture. I found him near the central fountain, standing. With military stiffness, his lawyer's composure fractured by the rapid tapping of his foot against the gravel, a tell I'd observed before major court cases. "You came," he said, relief evident in his voice. "I wasn't sure you would." Curiosity outweighed better judgment, I replied, remaining standing when he gestured toward a bench. "You have 15 minutes, Michael. Make them count." His eyes darted around the garden before settling back on me. "Not here. There's a cafe just outside the colonnade. More background noise." I understood his meaning, harder for potential surveillance to isolate our conversation amid cafe chatter. I nodded, and we walked silently across the garden, maintaining a careful distance between us, no longer the couple who'd once strolled hand in hand through Central Park, discussing renovation plans for our weekend house. The cafe was cramped and authentically Parisian. No tourist menus, no English spoken. We claimed a corner table, ordering espressos neither of us wanted but which justified our occupation of valuable real estate. Once the server departed, Michael leaned forward, his voice barely above a whisper. "James isn't who you think he is. You've mentioned that," I said dryly. "Elaborate or move on." Michael withdrew his phone, pulled up what appeared to be a banking document, and slid it across the table. 6 months ago, James met with Anton Giraud in Zurich. Not at a banking conference, privately at Giraud's estate. 3 days later, this account was opened in the Caymans. I glanced at the document, account details showing substantial deposits totaling nearly 8 million euros. The account holder's name was obscured, but the transaction dates were highlighted. This proves nothing, I said, sliding the phone back. It could be anyone's account. It's a shell company controlled by James's brother-in-law, Michael countered. The same brother-in-law who coincidentally joined the board of Mercier's technology subsidiary last quarter. I kept my expression neutral despite the seed of doubt taking root. And you learned this through your spotless ethical investigation. I learned it because I've been working with the Financial Intelligence Unit for 14 months, Michael said, his voice taking on an urgency I hadn't heard before. Roland brought me in because of my expertise in international finance law. The operation is legitimate, Emma. Our espressos arrived, creating a momentary pause. I studied Michael's face, the faint shadows under his eyes, the tension lines around his mouth. He appeared genuinely stressed, not merely performing concern. If this is legitimate, I asked after the server left, why the secretive accounts? The falsified billing records? James showed me the documentation. Of course he did, Michael muttered. He needed to control the narrative. He rubbed his temple. Another tell, this one rare and genuine. The accounts appear suspicious by design. We needed to create a money trail Giroux would recognize as legitimate. If his financial analysts detected pristine transactions, they'd know immediately it was a trap. The explanation was plausible, disturbingly so. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, the hurt in my voice surprising me despite everything. 12 years, Michael. You could have trusted me. His expression softened momentarily. Operational security. Even Roland doesn't know everyone involved. He hesitated. And I was trying to protect you. Giroux has eliminated people for knowing far less. Yet you involved Elise, I observed, unable to keep the edge from my voice. Michael winced. That was complicated. She has banking connections we needed, access to channels closed to Americans, and to your bed, apparently. He had the decency to look ashamed. That was never supposed to happen. We worked closely for months under intense pressure. I'm not proud of it, Emma. I sipped my espresso, the bitterness matching my mood. So James is what? A mole for Giroux? Working against this covert operation of yours? Not originally, Michael said. We believe he was turned recently, when Giroux somehow identified our investigation. James's financial situation isn't as secure as he pretends. His divorce last year hit him harder than anyone at the firm realizes. This was true. James's ex-wife had received a substantial settlement, though he'd never appeared financially strained. He's been accessing files outside his purview for months, Michael continued. Now suddenly he's investigating discrepancies he shouldn't know exist, bringing you to Paris, creating division exactly when our operation reaches its critical phase. My thoughts raced, reassessing everything from this new perspective. Could James have manipulated me, used my anger over Michael's abandonment to unwittingly help sabotage a legitimate investigation? What do you want from me? I asked finally. Michael drew a deep breath. Elise secured critical documents that would expose Giroux's entire network. Banking records, shell company structures, communication logs. They're in a secure location that James can't access. Credit Suisse, I supplied, watching his reaction. Surprise flickered across his face before he controlled it. Yes, but accessing them requires both physical presence and authorization codes. I can't do it alone, not now, with James watching my movements. And you need me because you can move more freely. James doesn't see you as a threat to whatever he's planning. You're just the angry wife he's manipulating. The assessment stung, even coming from Michael. Charming. I'm sorry, he said, genuine remorse in his voice. I've handled everything badly. The marriage, this operation, you, but I'm asking for your help now. Not for me, but because innocent people will suffer if Giroux's operation continues. I considered his request, weighing James's warnings against Michael's apparent sincerity. Both versions were plausible. Both men had evidence supporting their claims. Both had reasons to manipulate me. If I were to help, I said carefully, what exactly would it involve? Relief crossed Michael's features. We go to Credit Suisse together. Elise authorized both of us as signatories. We retrieve the documentation, deliver it to our FIU contact at the embassy, and it's done. You can return to New York, or stay. In Paris if you prefer, but safely away from all this. And Elise? Where is she while we're accessing her account? Meeting with Giroux's representatives, maintaining our cover. He checked his watch. The bank closes at 4, if we're going. To do this, we need to move now. I made my decision, though not perhaps the one he expected. I'll help on one condition. Name it. Complete honesty moving forward. No more compartmentalization, no more protective lies. I held his gaze steadily. I need to know exactly what I'm walking into. Michael nodded slowly. Agreed, though there are some details I literally cannot share, not without proper clearance. I understand operational security, I said, but no more personal deceptions. He extended his hand across the table, a strangely formal gesture between people who had shared a bed for 12 years. Deal. I shook it briefly, then withdrew. I need to return to the hotel first. My passport is there. Be discreet, he warned. If James suspects... I know how to handle James, I interrupted, rising from the table. Meet me at the bank at 3. As I walked away, I felt Michael's eyes following me, hopeful, perhaps, that he'd convinced me of his version of the truth. What he couldn't know was that I'd made a different calculation entirely. Back at La Bristol, I found James waiting in our suite, tension evident in the tight line of his shoulders as he paced near the windows. You shouldn't have gone alone, he said immediately. Roland's people could have... Michael isn't working with Roland anymore, I interrupted, setting my purse on the table. At least that's what he wants me to believe. James stopped pacing. Explain. I relayed the conversation in detail. Michael's claims about the legitimate investigation, the accusations about James's meeting with Giroux, the Cayman account connected, to his brother-in-law, his request for help accessing the Credit Suisse documents. James listened without interruption, his expression growing darker with each revelation. When I finished, he remained silent for a long moment. Well, he finally said, they're more desperate than I thought. Creating elaborate fictions now. Is it fiction? I challenged. Your brother-in-law did join Mercier's board last quarter. I remember Michael mentioning it. A flash of something. Anger? Concern? Crossed James's face. Andrew was recruited by Mercier directly because of his expertise in financial technology integration. It has nothing to do with me or this situation. And the Zurich meeting with Giroux? Never happened, James stated flatly. I attended a compliance conference where Giroux was a keynote speaker, along with 300 other finance professionals. We never spoke privately. His explanation seemed reasonable, yet doubt lingered. I'd spent the past day trusting James implicitly, allowing his narrative to shape my understanding of Michael's betrayal. Had I been too quick to believe him because he offered escape when I felt abandoned? What did you tell Michael? James asked, breaking my reverie. That I'd help him access the Credit Suisse documents, meeting him at the bank at 3. James nodded slowly. Good. This gives us an opportunity. For what exactly? To determine what's actually in that safe deposit box, he said. If it contains evidence of money laundering, as I suspect, Michael's entire terrorism investigation story collapses. If it contains legitimate intelligence on Giroux. He left the alternative unspoken. So you want me to go through with it? Access the box with Michael? Yes, but not alone. James moved to the desk, opened his laptop, and pulled up what appeared to be architectural plans. Credit Suisse's private banking facility has a specific protocol for accessing high-security boxes. Both authorized signatories must be present, but they're taken to separate verification rooms before entering the vault together. I studied the layout he displayed. How do you have these plans? The firm handled a legal dispute involving the building's renovation last year, he explained smoothly. During those moments when you're separated from Michael, I need you to create a diversion, something requiring staff attention while I access the verification room. The risk seemed enormous. You want to impersonate Michael? At a Swiss bank known for security? Not exactly, James clarified. I need 3 minutes in the verification room to install this. He withdrew what looked like a sophisticated flash drive from his briefcase. It's a copying device for the bank's internal network. It will download whatever documentation is examined when the box is opened. I frowned, increasingly uncomfortable with the escalating stakes. That sounds illegal. It's a gray area, James admitted. But it's our best option for independently verifying the contents without alerting Michael or Roland. And if we're caught? You wouldn't be implicated. The device is untraceable, and I'd take full responsibility. I paced to the window, looking out at the elegant Parisian rooftops while considering my options. Both men wanted to access the same documents. Both claimed righteousness while accusing the other of corruption. Both had evidence supporting their version of events. What if you're both lying to me? I asked suddenly, turning to face him. What if there's something else entirely in that box? James's expression remained neutral, but I caught the slight tension in his jaw. Like what? I don't know, I admitted, but I'm tired of being a pawn in whatever game you're all playing. You're not a pawn, Emma, he said, his voice softening. You're the unexpected queen on this chessboard. The piece no one anticipated having to counter. The metaphor was apt, if self-serving. I thought of how Roland had watched me at the cafe, reassessing his strategy when I appeared, how Michael's careful planning had unraveled when I boarded. That plane to Paris instead of returning home broken-hearted. I'll do it, I decided. But I want to see whatever you find. Unfiltered, unedited, before you take it anywhere or show it to anyone else. James nodded solemnly. You have my word. As we finalized the details of our plan, I wondered which man I was betraying more, my husband or his business partner. Perhaps both, perhaps neither. The truth seemed to shift like Parisian light, revealing different facets depending on where one stood. 3 hours later, I approached Credit Suisse's discreet entrance on the Rue du Rhône. Michael waited outside, wearing a charcoal suit I hadn't seen before, presumably purchased in Paris to replace the one he'd hastily packed when abandoning me. You came, he said, echoing his greeting from the garden. I said I would, I replied simply. Shall we? Together, we entered the bank's rarefied atmosphere of old money and extreme discretion. Michael spoke briefly to the receptionist in surprisingly fluent French, presenting his identification while I did the same. We were escorted to a private consultation room where a senior bank official greeted us with practiced courtesy. Monsieur Matthews, madame, he said with a slight bow. Mademoiselle, Beaumont informed us you might be accessing her secure holdings. We require verification before proceeding. Of course, Michael replied smoothly. We're authorized signatories. Indeed. If you'll follow me, monsieur, and madame, my colleague will assist you with your verification. This matched precisely with James's description. We would be separated, briefly for identity confirmation before being reunited to access the vault. As a female bank employee gestured for me to follow her down a different corridor, I caught Michael's reassuring nod. My heart raced as I followed the woman to a small, elegantly appointed room. According to James's timeline, I needed to create a diversion within precisely 2 minutes, enough time for him to access the adjacent verification room where Michael was being processed. The bank employee offered me a seat at a small desk. Your passport, please, madame. As I reached into my purse, I deliberately knocked it from my lap, spilling its contents across the plush carpet. Je suis désolé, I exclaimed, dropping to my knees to gather the scattered items. The employee immediately knelt to help, just as James had predicted she would. Bank protocol demanded assisting valued clients. Ce n'est pas grave, madame, she assured me, reaching for a lipstick that had rolled under a chair. While she was distracted, I pressed the small panic button on my watch, the signal to James that the diversion was underway. According to our plan, he would now have approximately 90 seconds to access Michael's verification room, install the copying device, and exit before security protocols could identify the intrusion. I prolonged the cleanup, asking questions about banking hours and currency exchange rates, keeping the employee engaged as seconds ticked by. Just as we finished restoring order to my purse, a discreet knock came at the door. "Verification complete," the woman announced after checking something on her computer. "You may now join your husband in the vault antechamber." I followed her down a different corridor, wondering if James had succeeded, if Michael suspected anything, if I was walking into a confrontation rather than a simple document retrieval. The carefully controlled environment of the bank suddenly felt claustrophobic, its elegant restraint masking potential danger. In the antechamber, Michael waited with a different bank official who held a small digital tablet. "Authentication confirmed," he informed us. "Please follow me." The vault itself was a masterpiece of Swiss engineering, gleaming steel, sophisticated locking mechanisms, the quiet hum of climate control systems maintaining optimal conditions for whatever valuables were stored within. We were escorted to a private viewing room where the safe deposit box would be brought. "Do you know what we're looking for exactly?" I asked Michael once we were alone. "USB drives containing financial records, plus hard copies of certain transaction documents," he replied, his attention focused on the door through which the box would arrive. "Everything is encrypted, so it will look like gibberish to anyone but our analysts." I nodded, wondering what James's copying device would reveal when it extracted this data. Confirmation of criminal activity or evidence of a legitimate counterterrorism operation. The bank official returned carrying a sleek metal box, which he placed on the table before us. "You have 30 minutes of privacy, after which I will return. If you require assistance, please use the call button." When he departed, Michael inserted a key into the box's lock, then entered a 6-digit code on the digital pad, our anniversary date, just as James had predicted. The lid opened with a soft hydraulic hiss. Inside were exactly what Michael had described: several USB drives and a folder of documents marked with codes rather than words. He quickly photographed the folder contents with his phone, then transferred the USB drives to a secure pouch. "That's it?" I asked, surprised by the anticlimax. "That's it," he confirmed, securing the empty box. "Now we deliver these to the embassy contact and it's over." But as Michael turned toward the door, it opened to reveal not the bank official, but Roland Wakefield, flanked by 2 men whose bearings screamed security personnel despite their expensive suits. "I'm afraid," Roland said with cold precision, "that won't be possible. That won't be possible."